back to Movies That Matter, the podcast where entertainment is subjective, and that's not a bad thing. I'm Chris Flaherty, and thank you for joining us from the podcast studio at Burlington Cable Access Television. Today we'll be discussing Pixar's underrated gem from last year, Elio, which was released on June 20th, 2025 by Walt Disney Pictures. It was directed by Adrian Molina, Domichi, and Madeline Sharafian. I apologize for mispronunciations in advance. From a screenplay by Julia Cho, Mark Hammer, and Mike Jones. The original story was conceived by Cho and the three directors, and stars the voices of Jonas Kibriab, Zoe Saldana, Remy Eggerly, and Brad Garrett. And now I would like to introduce my guest today, who's here to talk about the film with me, Ben Stanley, media analyst, content creator, Pixar Enthusiast, Christmas Carol expert, and artist and owner of Cinematic Scribbles, and he also just likes to yap about movies, so he's definitely in the right place. Welcome, Ben.
Well, hello.
Thank you for including Christmas Carol expert in your bio, because that's actually how I initially discovered you on TikTok.
That is, I've been surprised how many doors that has opened. Yeah. And I a couple years ago went and marathon watched every single film adaptation of A Christmas Carol, which is just a sort of project I'd always thought about doing, and it just sort of happened. And I'm not joking, the fourth or fifth podcast I've been invited on to because of that marathon.
Let's talk Elio. So just to start off, in your own words, tell me, what is this film about?
So Elio tells the story of an 11-year-old boy who is a sort of lonely kid who grows up on a military base. His parents had recently died and was taken under custody by, that sounded like a police thing. His new guardian is his aunt, and basically he, after discovering at a young age about the Voyager space module, becomes obsessed with alien life and kind of hyperfixates on that, tries to get himself abducted by aliens until one day it actually happens, but due to a miscommunication between him and the aliens, they seem to believe that he's some kind of political leader or ruler of Earth, and he just kind of has to go along with that out of fear of returning to his old boring life, and chaos ensues from there.
Yep, perfect. How did you what was your first introduction or discovery of this film?
So, I'm obviously a massive Pixar fan, and I think I've probably seen every Pixar film opening weekend for the majority of my life. So it's not like this was one I just oh, hey, what's this? Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about Elio for me is that for over a decade since Inside Out, I have purposefully avoided any trailer or marketing for any upcoming Pixar film.
Wow.
So I like to know as little as possible, because it just so happened is I didn't have any exposure to the internet or TV leading up to Inside Out, and so I didn't know it was about emotions. I had no idea what the film was about. So seeing the film unfold as it goes, Coco, I didn't know took place in the underworld. I didn't know that the sea monsters transformed in Luca. It's so cool to see the story unfold going in cold. And so I definitely benefited through Elio because the teaser trailer is a significantly different film than what ends up happening.
Right.
So I went in, I saw the film knowing literally only that Zoe Saldana was in it and that it was about a kid with an eye patch. And I think I knew that there was an alien abduction because the poster has him being transported. That's it. I didn't know anything else. And so being able to become absorbed in this world and immediately empathize with this kid was such a great experience for me. And so I guess just to back up, about a month before Elio came out, I had done a series on my TikTok explaining the deeper meanings and the themes of the endings of pretty much every feature Pixar film.
Yeah.
And so I had recently gained a reputation as a Pixar content creator. And so I'm okay, well, I have to obviously review this when it first comes out. And so I saw the preview screening. It was actually on my son's first birthday.
Oh, nice.
And I went to see it alone because we couldn't get a babysitter that day. And so it's just, I felt really bad. His birthday party wasn't the weekend. It wasn't until the weekend. So I didn't feel super bad about having to leave him to see this movie alone. but like I remember I sat in like the second or third row, like last minute I like moved to the front, and I'm so glad I did because some of the visuals and the space sequences and stuff were just so mesmerizing, and so seeing that on the big screen was an incredible experience. But again, because I don't know the premises or what to expect with all these Pixar films, I have pretty neutral expectations. I have no idea what to expect. And so this one, it just kind of looked like another standard coming of age film because that's what a lot of recent Pixar films had been. And so I didn't expect it to be as emotionally potent as it was. I pretty famously said that like I cried probably 2 or 3 times in that first viewing. And there's a moment in the first 10 minutes that made me well up. Basically, my expectations were far exceeded. And I had to I had to check myself. I was like, do I like this because it's a new Pixar film and I'm going to be making a lot of videos about it? Or do I actually like this because of the film itself? And I made a video immediately after I saw it in my car of my review. And that video was discovered by Pixar's social media team. And they actually asked to repost it onto their social media channels.
Wow.
And so that was just like mind blowing. And so I was not the only person they did this with. There was maybe 10 other people that they would basically, they just messaged me like, hey, can we confirm that you made this video and would it be okay if we put it on our channel? And so maybe about 2 or 3 weeks later, they posted it to like their Instagram and TikTok and stuff like that. Unaltered, just exactly what my honest thoughts were. Mm-hmm. But because I was honest, I said what I thought the film was trying to say and my experience with it. And I'm really glad that was my review before I saw any other reviews, before I saw what the internet or what the world in general had reacted to it. But yeah, I have completely forgotten what the original question was. But yeah, that was sort of my experience in seeing it because I was going to see it anyway. I just didn't expect to like it as much as I did.
What really stuck out with you when you first watched it? I know you mentioned a few scenes that you welled up in, and then like the animation you were in the front row for, and it is breathtaking. I mean, I just rewatched it on Disney Plus last night, but I wish I could see it on the big screen again because some of the space stuff is just breathtaking.
Yeah. The very first scene, they have like a presentation about the Voyager, and they like are in the stars and in the space, this whole atmosphere, this sort of like planetarium exhibition. But the scene that made me well up was they make first contact with the aliens, and so he's getting ready to pack in a suitcase so he can go because he believes he's about to be taken, and his aunt doesn't believe that anything's happening, and he keeps saying, no, I really, really need to meet aliens. And she's like, why? And he's like, because there's 500 million inhabitable planets out there, and one of them's got to want me because obviously you don't. Yeah. And like that just hit really hard because of the emotionality just between the characters, but also it's such a really common experience for certain kids to feel like they're on the wrong planet. And so it wasn't just the emotions with the characters. It was just the fact that like that was such a relatable experience with Elio. And the themes of loneliness are so potent in the film. It's not even subtle.
Yeah.
But like I related to Elio in that way of being this lonely kid. And the thing that stuck out to me, I picked up almost immediately. They definitely wrote Elio to be a child on the autism spectrum. They like it was almost certain that was what they did. There was some kind of autism coding in the writing, and when I went back and like analyzed it, it was like so obvious. There was just like all these patterns of behavior, and a lot of the pattern of behavior was having to do with him coping with his grief. But like the giveaway is that Olga reads this parenting book called Parenting Your Spirited Child. And spirited became this sort of euphemism for neurodivergence in the 90s for parents who didn't want to admit that their kid was ADHD or autistic. And so people always say, oh, well, it's not canon that he is. I'm like, it basically is with that book. And so I am on the autism spectrum, and I wasn't diagnosed until 3 years ago. So I went my whole childhood not knowing that there was something wrong with my brain. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 20, but didn't realize that a lot of my ADHD symptoms seemed a lot more severe, and that was because I also was on the autism spectrum. And so, like, Elio appears to be this kid who is on the spectrum and doesn't know it, and so he feels completely out of place in this world. And that was something that I related to with him. And, like, I wouldn't say that I fully. I mean, that's basically the only thing that I share in common with Elio. I wasn't like a super lonely kid. I wasn't like a social outcast or anything, but that particular mindset of his, of feeling like he's on the wrong planet, that there's something wrong with him, and everyone else, is rejecting him because they don't perfectly align with what his mindset is, was something that just really stood out to me.
Yeah. There's a lot of lines that stuck out with me, and I'm going to try and recite them without welling up, but what was it? What if there's nothing about me to want? That really killed me.
Yeah, that scene. Yeah,
and it's all like it's in some way it's a lot of it's tied to his grief, his loss of his parents. Yeah, which is I mean, I lost a parent in 2022, and I've definitely like kind of felt lost after that. So I connected to him in that sense. But like I do, the whole movie really hones down the theme of like you are not alone, which I think is great. Right. It down to the the Voyager. It's not the Voyager message, is it? I'm not sure.
It's the golden record on the Voyager spacecraft.
Yeah, and then it plays at the end in a very awesome final moment.
Yeah, and that's all actual recordings.
Right.
The multiple language recording, and the narration at the very end is Carl Sagan, who is the physicist or the scientist who organized that whole project.
Yeah.
But again, that's all actual recordings that were used on that actual spacecraft.
That's awesome. I know this film is just shy of a year old, but there are any specific viewings that like stick out in your memory when you watched it at a certain time or with a certain person?
Because it didn't do well at the box office, I live in a sort of mid-sized town, and so I have 2 theaters here, but they're very selective. And by the time that my wife and I were able to get a babysitter, it was already out of theaters.
Wow.
It was like 2 weeks later, less than 2 weeks later, and for like Jurassic World took all the theater. And so I was so angry because I really wanted to show my wife this movie. So the day that it released on digital, I showed it to her. And she wasn't as moved as much as me, but actually, interestingly, we rewatched it this morning, and I think that was the second time that she had seen it, and she got so emotional during the climax that she didn't really quite grasp the first time she saw it, and that was the first time that I'd watched it with someone who finally understood why it was as emotional of a film as me.
Yeah,
but yeah, that first viewing was probably one of my favorite theater experiences in recent years, just because it was so unexpected how much I would be enamored by it.
Who among the voice cast really sticks out to you?
I did really like the performance of Jonas Gabriel, and I've actually interacted with him on social media. He's on TikTok, and
awesome.
I expressed how much I appreciated his performance, and I've asked him a couple questions, about the Elioese and I thought Elio was 10 and he confirmed he was 11, that sort of thing. So, but the kid who voices Glord, Remy Ellerton, something like that. He's fantastic, and I think that character would not have been as lovable or memorable if it weren't for his performance. Really, I'm always impressed when a child actor or child voice actor can make an impression in a voice role, because it's one thing to be cute on camera and recite lines, but it's another thing to actually have a performance that comes through in your voice when you're as young and inexperienced as a lot of these kids are.
I think it's something that Pixar really is really well at, like, casting young children.
Oh yeah. It not only is it with the casting of the child actors, but also whenever they do a long delayed sequel and they have to like recast Dash or Nemo, is like they somehow find a kid who not only sounds exactly like the original but also does a good performance.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Luca in particular, the girl who voices Julia, that was her first film role.
Wow.
She was like 12 when they cast her. It was during the pandemic and everything. And I thought she did such a perfect job. And so she and I have become, I don't know, friendly. We've followed each other on social media. I've sent her some of my artwork. And so I've just been following her career because she's been doing voice stuff for Disney since then. But yeah, whenever they can get like the right child actor, particularly for a lot of these newer films that have child protagonists, I think that sort of makes or breaks the film.
You talked about a few. Or can you tell me some of your favorite scenes or moments from the film?
Visually, the scene that I will never get tired of watching is the moment when Elio enters the Communiverse. It's just so incredible what they do with not only the colors but just the unique way in which they craft this world. Emotionally, I feel that the scene they really nailed was when Elio and Olga are on the beach after Elio gets ejected from the Communiverse and she's trying to look for him and she doesn't realize that he's not the clone. I think that's sort of the emotional peak of their relationship. And both actors do such a great job with that scene.
Yeah.
The montage between Elio and Glorden experiencing the Communiverse and just being kids throughout, like, purely from a storytelling perspective, that scene is completely useless.
It's just accelerating the movie forward.
Yeah. But the music and the joy with these kids, just it's such a just joyous experience watching it. And it helps you really fall in love with these characters even more because you kind of just met Gordon at that point in the movie.
Right.
And so, yeah, everything about that scene I also love. So, yeah, I think those are some of the standouts to me.
Okay. How do you think Pixar films sort of like inspired or influenced your career path?
I frequently credit the Monsters, Inc. DVD set from 2003 as what got me interested in animation, but also in filmmaking in general, because this was back when DVDs were just jam-packed with bonus features and stuff. And so they had a ton of behind-the-scenes stuff. And I think that was the first DVD that was released by Pixar. And so they had all this stuff about how Pixar operates, and then all the behind-the-scenes stuff, all the development of Monsters, Inc. And then the Finding Nemo DVD was also just jam-packed with stuff. And so I realized recently that part of the reason I'm such a diehard Pixar fan is because of that DVD. But in a way, that was also, that was when I was like 6 or 7 that I started watching all that stuff. And that was what got me to understand the process of computer animation and then the process of forming a story and developing characters. And so I always defend the fact that Pixar is not just the animation, but they care a great deal about story and storytelling. And while, in their early years and even in some regards now, they're still continuing to progress the computer animation technology, their films wouldn't have been as memorable as they were if they didn't nail the story and the characters as well.
Right.
And so, and now as an adult and a content creator, being able to dissect that has been really interesting in seeing, like, why they would have done certain things, why they would have, told the story in a certain way. Yeah, I think it's all just kind of rooted in my appreciation for Pixar, and that's obviously expanded since then. I didn't really grow up watching movies other than Pixar. I was a huge theater kid, and so I mostly just focused on doing theater and stuff. And so it wasn't until I became an adult that I kind of really broadened my horizon with films in general. I took a few filmography classes in college. And so, but the base has always been Pixar and the way that they tell stories. And so in terms of how that's sort of inspired, I mean, my quote unquote career right now is doing media analysis with my content. I tend to do a lot of stuff that sort of analyzes themes and analyzes stories so that to get people to have a better understanding and appreciation for film. And particularly in understanding what it's trying to say, because there's such a crisis with media literacy these days. And so helping people understand or interpret a film correctly is sort of what I try to do now. And so having Pixar be that basis of teaching me story structure has been, I think, valuable in that way. And so, starting off analyzing all these Pixar films, but then going from there and applying that same sort of thing with my content of analyzing themes and story structure has all really stemmed from that.
Mm-hmm. I do love you misunderstood the ending of the Pixar film series. You do.
Yeah.
I think, was it the Coco one where it was like right before the sequel was announced? It was kind of like, you're kind of just like a little like tongue in cheek about we don't need a sequel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that one.
I've done every Pixar film now except for Lightyear, and then technically I never actually broke down the themes of Coco. Mm-hmm. And I plan to at some point, but yeah. And that was really interesting because like when I started that series of explaining the endings of Pixar films, I had like 4 videos in mind. Mm-hmm. And then people kept requesting other ones to talk about, and so it just ended up where I ended up doing all the features. And like there are a lot of them that were films I don't really care for, that I was sort of forced myself to analyze the themes and came to appreciate them. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I can also continue to apply. Is like, okay, I might not have cared for the film. Let me put my brain in the mind of the filmmaker and see what they were trying to say, even if I don't think that they executed it well.
Mm-hmm. Let's address the elephant in the room, as it were. Yes. Last year, when Elio came out, there was a lot of talk in the tabloids about production drama behind the scenes. You want to just give us the TED Talk on it?
Yes. So before those articles came out, it was it was common knowledge that, I don't know about common knowledge, but it was public knowledge that there were significant changes to Elio's story, and you could tell this if you watched the original teaser trailer from 2023 compared to the second trailer from the next year.
Totally different film.
Because, yeah, completely different film. And it's just, I remember I went, because like I said, I avoided the trailers. Mm-hmm. So I went back and watched the trailers after I saw the film, and I watched that first one. I'm like, what is going on? Why is Dragon a part of the universe? Why is Olga his mother? It was just like, there were so many things here. I was like, how did this much of the film change and yet it still turn out coherent and thematically rich? That's the thing that I find the most impressive, is how much of the film had to change and yet it still turned out really good. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was about a week after Elio came out and it didn't do hot at the box office that the Hollywood Reporter dropped an article basically cracking open a bunch of the drama that had happened, because they talked to disgruntled ex-Pixar employees. Because shortly before Inside Out 2, there was like over 1,000 layoffs.
Right.
Because Bob Iger cleaned house. And one of them is someone who I've become friends with, who worked for the streaming department. She worked very early on in Elio. And so she's already told me some of the stuff that had happened. But this article was a lot more antagonistic, and basically, because so much of the film had to be changed, the people who worked on the original version of it were very, very upset about what was changed. And so what had happened was Adrian Molina, he was the co-director of Coco, and he'd been developing this film since at least 2020. And it was based off of his own life as a Latino child growing up on a Air Force base. It had been going really well. Pixar and Disney liked what they were seeing, but then there was a test screening in Arizona in the summer of 23, and that was after the first trailer had come out, actually. And so they screened it, and the audience reception was pretty positive. But when they asked the audience would you pay money to see this in a theater? Nobody raised their hand. And so that set off panic alarms and stuff at Disney. And so they felt, okay, we need to figure out how to make this more generally accessible. Maybe it was a bit too niche. We need to make it funnier. We need to make Elio a more relatable character. The latter half of 2023, they had to completely retool it. And so in doing so, they changed the film so much that Adrian Molina felt that it wasn't his film anymore, that it was out of his hands. It wasn't the vision he was trying to tell. And so so he stepped down from the production, and that was around the time that they greenlit Coco 2. So he stepped down so that he could then work on Coco 2. And so a lot of people say that he was fired because of the bad test screenings, and that wasn't the case. He still worked on the film a little bit before he stepped down. So at that point, Madeline Sharafian and Domi Shi, was the director of Turning Red. Madeline Sharafian was she was the head storyboard artist on Elio already. Basically, they were both promoted to be co-directors, and Pixar's weird. So they'll have a director and one or two co-directors, but co-director basically is like functionally like assistant director.
Right.
They're not actually, but Elio is the first time where they were actually in tandem. They were equally parts director, and but so them and Adrian Molina is still credited as a director because a good chunk of it was directed by him, but he didn't do any press for it. He, to this day, we still don't know what his reaction was to the final film. But they still gave him proper credit for developing and directing as much of the film as was done under him. But that's the first time where you have like three different directors who all had equally high hands in directing it. So anyway, Maddie and Domi were brought in at the very end of 23. So Elio was supposed to come out in the summer of 24, but then they postponed it to 25, and then they moved Inside Out 2 up. Right. Which that's a whole other story. They had to like really scramble to do that. Once it was in Domi and Maddie's hands, they really had to sort of mold it their own. And they've expressed that was really difficult because they're like, somebody else built this sandbox that we now have to carefully mold. We want to tell the best story that's respectful to these characters and respectful to the original vision, but at the same time, we can't stick with the original vision. So, we're going to make the best film that we can. And so throughout 24 was when a majority of these changes were happening. And then the film released in 25. So also during that time, Olga was to be voiced by America Ferrera. She was like, when they announced the film in D23, like she came on the stage and talked about it. Like she was very forefront in the production of it. But then when they postponed it, they recast They recast Olga with Zoe Saldana because America Ferrera had too many scheduling conflicts. But this expose from the Hollywood Reporter claims that it was that she actually quit the production because she was upset that Adrian Molina was no longer directing because he was Latino. I don't know what to believe there because it's just kind of a heard from a guy sort of thing. Yeah. And they get anonymous sources. From everything else that we've seen, it was because of production issues. I'm actually shocked that she was the only recasting because so much of the film had to be changed, and particularly some of the child voices, I'm surprised were able to stay the same. Jonas in particular, his voice dropped by the time he was doing press for the film.
My God.
In fact, his voice is dropped in the post-credit scene, and I've always wondered why. Like, they must have recorded that a lot later than the rest of the film.
Oh, I have to rewatch that now.
Yeah, I know. I only noticed it somewhat recently, but anyway, majority of the story was changed during this process. And so what my friend who worked on it explained to me is she said, you will have massive story overhauls like this for every Pixar film. But the reason why Elio's was so significant and so emotional was because of how far the film was finished when they had to undo it all. because like there are whole scenes that are 100% animated from the original version that are like on the bonus features and stuff. That was part of the test screening. Like the entire thing was done, and so the people who had worked on the film for like 3 to 5 years, were so invested in this. The film had changed so much that they were understandably upset about why so much of it had to be changed. And so, from what I've gathered, what I've learned, and there's an entire community of Elio fanatics who do all of this digging of trying to figure out what the original version was. Basically, everyone agrees that how the film turned out is a completely different film from the original version. The characters have the same names, and there's generally the same setting, but like the message, the tone, the plots, the character relationships are all completely different, and it shouldn't even be considered a different version of the same film. A lot of people just say it's a completely different film. And so the ex-employees who talked to the Hollywood Reporter claimed that Elio was originally written to be queer-coded, and one of the mandates that Disney gave when they rewrote it is that they couldn't do that anymore. The person I talked to said any queer coding was not intentional. That was the main character trait that Elio was to have was to be a little boy. And so that wasn't an intentional or blatant part of his character. However, because a lot of those themes were present, many people who saw screeners of the film or who worked internally at Pixar interpreted it to be queer coding. So basically, I have a anonymous source who tells me that was not the intention, but no one really believes me when I say that. And unfortunately, I can't like out my friend here because she does still work at Disney. I mean, she was laid off from Pixar, but she does still work for Disney. And so like, I can't substantiate a lot of what I'm saying. But the point is, there were things that were present that, whether intentionally or not, imply that Elio may have been queer. And so ones that are brought up a lot is that he wore a pink tank top under his like academy uniform, and there was a scene where he found a bunch of trash on the beach, and he put together a bunch of clothes and put on a fashion show for hermit crabs. And you still sort of see that in the film, his homemade capes that are made up of like trash. That's sort of a remnant of that. And so a lot of people assumed that to mean that it was some kind of queer, some kind of hint of him being queer. And it should be noted, Adrian Molina is very openly gay. And so with Elio being somewhat reflective of his childhood, a lot of people thought that was what they were trying to say. And there was also supposedly a picture of another boy from his class hanging in his room that people interpreted to be a male crush of some sort. That's one where I'm just like, I think you're reaching there. Like, it could have just been his
just
friend.
a friend.
And and so it's difficult for me to talk about this because many times I have people in the LGBT community have come after me saying that, my perspective is not as important. But many of those things you could see as queer coding. Many of them you could just see as a little boy being silly. And or just a boy being effeminate, and that doesn't necessarily define your sexuality. But again, the thing that my friend emphasized to me was that his sexuality was not important to who his character was. Anyway, so a lot of the people who blabbed to the press saw like one or two screenings and was like, oh, well, I saw things that clearly meant he was queer coded, and so when they changed the film and those things weren't in there, that clearly meant that Disney told them to remove that. And so, again, a lot of it is just kind of hearsay and interpretation. I always say it was kind of blown out of proportion, because even if that was the case, it was never a main thing. Like, so many people are like, oh, it used to be this whole queer allegory and all this stuff. Like, no, it never was. I'm just sort of the opinion of, like, I like the Elio that we got. Whether he would have been, a little different before, it's like, I think it works better to just have him be a kid who's just lonely and is a little weird. I think making it specifically where it was something about his sexuality that he hadn't discovered yet because he's 11,
Right.
I think is maybe a bit too niche. And so I think it works a lot better the way it is. But again, as many people in the community have told me, that's not for me to say. The original version of the film, the Elio clone was a much bigger role.
Okay.
In fact, he was even like somewhat of an antagonist.
Oh.
Yeah, so basically, Elio goes to the camp in the old version, and they have the clone to take his place, and so the clone is this super athletic, super likable kid. And in a lot of the deleted scenes, there's this deleted scene where he does this obstacle course at the camp, where he just like totally owns the whole obstacle course, and all the kids suddenly respect him. And so, and based off of plot synopses that I've heard from anonymous test screeners, the people who were at the original test screening, supposedly the original climax was that clone Elio realized that he was going to be replaced, that the original Elio was going to come back because his mother Olga had accepted him. And so clone Elio kind of like transforms into this monster with tentacles that like wreak havoc on the Air Force Base. I know it sounds really ridiculous when I explain it. And like Dragon eventually has to like come down and like defeat it, and I'm just like, this. Okay, now I can see why maybe this original version didn't do super well.
I'd love to see the original version, but that I don't know.
Yeah, and so some people have interpreted that to mean to be some kind of allegory where there's this perfect idyllic version of Elio, and you do still see that in the clone version in the final film. And so Elio sort of fighting with this idyllic version of himself is sort of him overcoming that he should just be himself and act, not be ashamed of who he is one way to interpret that.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, so the original messaging of the film, according to my friend, was like the message ultimately was to be okay with yourself, accept yourself, and accept when you're different. Whereas the theme of the final film is more of you're not alone just because being different can feel lonely, but you are not alone just because you may not fit in with the rest. So that's where a lot of it came. And from what I've been told, the original version was a lot more emotional than it was funny. Sort of similar to Coco. And again, there are deleted scenes that show all of this, but basically Elio shows up to the universe and has to pass a series of 3 tests in order to become an ambassador. And so like one of them is like, okay, you need to settle this mock confrontation between warlords, and like how would you as a diplomat handle that? And one of them was a test with Cuesta, who's the ambassador, the pink ambassador there who mind reads. And basically it's a test where if he lies, like this like smoke sort of indicates the fact that he lies, and so like he has to be open with himself without outright admitting that he's not an ambassador. And so he sort of has to come to terms with like how he's feeling, his insecurities and things like that. So there's a lot more about Elio's character, about sort of discovering how he feels about himself. Whereas in the final version of Elio, a lot of it has to do with how he feels other people perceive him, particularly with how Olga perceives him. Like you said, that scene of him saying like, what if there's nothing about me to like? And one of the things that he does with one of the purposes of Gordon is to help him understand, Olga does still love you. You're not a burden on her like you think you are. Look at everything that she did for you. And so mending that relationship with Olga was sort of his way of, Olga basically the only significant relationship left in his life. That was sort of his way of understanding that, there are still people who care about him. And that sort of leads into the climax with the ham radio operators and then him forming the bond with Lorden. that all leads right into the finale where he makes the decision to not join the Communiverse because he wants to give Earth another chance now that he's understood that he didn't quite see how much of an impact he did have on other people's lives.
Mm-hmm. With all that said and done, do you think all this negative publicity hurt the film in any way?
Oh yeah, I think so. So that particular Hollywood Reporter article came out a week after the film bombed the box office, so it already was not doing great. Mm-hmm. And it was the worst opening for a Pixar film ever. I think that it hurt its reputation, but the thing I have to remind people all the time is, like, I don't think you realize how the majority of the people who go and see movies are not as chronically online as us. They don't follow these sort of things. Mm-hmm. Like, people always complain about, like, the bean mouth of these Pixar films. Like, oh yeah, the animation is so ugly, and that's why people didn't see them. Like, I guarantee you that a mother who is taking their kids to see a movie on a summer day didn't go to the theater, saw the poster, and like, oh, I'm not going to see this crap because of its mouth shape. It's like that. It's just like such a internet specific controversy that I don't think has any kind of meaningful impact. Mm-hmm. I think the majority of Elio's failure has to do with how poorly it was marketed. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that, people say Disney didn't have any faith in it anyway, and that's why they didn't market it. But yeah, so having a film that already didn't do well, and also happened to come out the same day that K-pop Demon Hunters released on Netflix.
Oh my god!
People were directly comparing them, so it's like it already was not in a good spot, and then sort of you slap that with this controversy.
Yeah.
Which again, a lot of it wasn't even new information, but yeah, I think that turned off any people who were still curious about it to not see it and form their own opinion of it without ever actually watching it, and that's sort of my biggest issue with a lot of the discourse online.
Yeah. I do agree with you that
so,
the marketing was abysmal.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, I don't know, because I avoid the marketing, that's not something that I can, like, really analyze. Mm-hmm. But when you directly compare it to, like, how Hoppers was marketed, for example, it's like night and day.
Yeah.
You also have the fact that it doesn't really sell the emotional core of the film. Mm-hmm. Elemental had the exact same problem. They focus more on the rom-com aspect, whereas like the self-discovery and immigration story and all the a lot deeper parts of the story were completely left out of the marketing. Mm-hmm. And so that's the other thing. But
yeah,
I am very, very upset at the animation community online in general for completely just dunking on Elio solely because it came out the same day as K-pop Demon Hunters. And I always say there's the only thing those two films have in common is a PG rating and a release date of June 20th. That is it. Like they're completely different stylistically, tone, artistically, genre. It's like these are not the sort of films that you should be comparing. K-pop Demon Hunters is its own phenomenal film in its own right and deserves all of the praise and success that it has, but it doesn't need to be compared to Elio because it doesn't. It's its own thing and it's successful in its own way. Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing is, like, YouTubers and content creators who directly compared them, just saying, this is such a sign that Pixar is going downhill. I'm like, so can you actually review Elio for what it is? Because I pointed out, I didn't find a single, because I remember like a week after, I watched every single YouTube review I could find, and both from professionals and amateurs and stuff like that. I didn't find a single review where someone didn't directly compare Elio to other Pixar films, particularly the ones from the 2000s. It was very frustrating. And so I'm like, okay. And then most of them would also bring up the production issues and what the film was supposed to be about. I'm like, okay, that's great. So what did you think about what the film actually was? Mm-hmm. Because no one would talk about that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the online discourse was tainted by the fact that people were reviewing the film incorrectly or just not at all. I always say that a telltale sign as to if I believe someone actually watched the film is if they go their entire review calling it Elio, because they say his name over 30 times in the film.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's no way that you actually finished and watched the entire film and still believe that it's pronounced Elio. I understand if you think that if you only see the title, but it's said so frequently in the film.
Yeah.
So, like, there are some reviews where I straight up believe that they didn't actually watch the film, that they read that Hollywood Reporter article and maybe read a plot synopsis, but just wanted ammunition against Pixar because the Sony Animation put out another masterpiece with K-pop Demon Hunters, and so suddenly people feel that is permission to hate on Disney, and I don't understand why we need to do that. Like, let's praise and put K-pop on its pedestal that it rightly deserves. Let's also look at Elio for the film that it actually is, and not the film that it's not.
Yeah, I think people just get ready to hate on Pixar at the first sign of trouble. Like, yeah. You mentioned, like, the worst box office opening in Pixar history. They said the same thing about Elemental, like, 2 years prior. And then I even remember, like, you said that about Ratatouille years ago. And then...
Yeah, well, in Lightyear as well.
Yeah.
Well, Elemental was a very interesting story because that had a really low opening. But then
it bounced back.
It gained a lot of momentum. And a lot of people attributed that to its poor marketing. Mm-hmm. It's like... its marketing did not sell people to see it on opening weekend, but then as people saw it and talked about it more and talked about the good aspects of the film, that is what propelled it. And also, summer of 2023 was a really weird year for cinema. That was Barbenheimer, and it came out the same day as The Flash, and then the writer strikes were going on.
Yeah.
So
a lot against it.
Yeah.
But I was one of the people screaming to go see Elemental in the void.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and that one also suffered by coming out 2 weeks after Across the Spider-Verse.
Oh my God, yeah. Another Sony movie.
Yeah. And so that's again, it's a whole thing, and it's just. But what I continually beg people, honestly, is like, can you just actually review the film for what you actually watched, not what you could have watched, not what you wanted to have watched, not what you would have preferred to watch itself. Tell me what you actually think of it. And there are a couple reviews that did actually talk about it. And I've made many videos where I say, this is an incorrect analysis of it. And I just straight up say, if you thought this about the film, you misunderstood it. But then there are a lot of legitimate criticisms, and I completely understand. And I'm not going to claim by any means that it's a flawless film. It's just people were focusing on the wrong things when they talk about it.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of a perfect segue into, and I'm glad you mentioned how passionate you were about this when I sent you the questions, because I've kind of garnered a reputation for myself where every time a new Pixar film comes out and I hear the crowd saying, Pixar is back, I get on my soapbox and I say, no, they never left. So what are your thoughts on this current era of Pixar films? And we'll say, like, I guess onward to the present day.
Yeah, so this decade, yeah. So, I've made videos talking about this. So this new era of Pixar films is different. Like, it is objectively different from the older films, and there are specific reasons for that. So a big one is that John Lasseter left Pixar in 2019, or 2018. So the last film that he touched before leaving was Toy Story 4. So anything after that was completely independent from him. And so when Pete Docter took over as the chief creative officer, he was much more in favor of letting storytellers tell the story that was personal to them. And then after Toy Story 4, Disney basically gave Pixar permission to, like, okay, we've milked enough billion-dollar sequels out of you. You guys can take it slow and tell the stuff you want to talk about now. And so that's how you get Onward, which is based off of the director's childhood growing up without a dad and having his brother be his father figure. And then you have Luca, which is based off of the Italian director's childhood growing up with a boy whose name was Alberto, and sort of teaching him to come out of his shell. Turning Red is very, very clearly a self-insert of Domi and growing up as a 13-year-old in 2002 Toronto to Chinese immigrants. And what was the other one? And Elemental is based off director Peter Sohn's life as the son of Korean immigrants, and then growing up to marry a white woman. And so, like, there's a recurring theme with so many of these films that are based off the personal experiences and childhoods of the filmmakers, and that's not a coincidence, because when John Lasseter was very good at making films with broad appeal. I say that in the past tense because I don't think his new films are
I haven't seen any of his new films, so
yeah. But when Pete Docter was just he's a lot less hands on. It's just like, Pete Docter, he directed Monsters Inc., Up, Inside Out, and Soul.
Mm-hmm.
So like he knows how to tell a good story and doesn't want to interfere with the artists who are doing that. And a lot of the artists who make these new movies are first-time directors. And Enrico Casarosa with Luca, Domi Shi with Turning Red, Angus MacLane with Lightyear. They're the newer talent. I wouldn't say newer. A lot of them have been there at Pixar for decades, but it was their first time having unrestrained ability to tell a story they wanted to tell. So, all this to lead back to, this era of Pixar is different because not only was it under new management, but also was purposefully telling more personal stories because of the directors and the stories that they chose to tell. Like even Lightyear, which is very obviously a spin-off, it was based off of the central concept was based off of the director's life. He worked at Pixar for 25 years, and he felt like every year time had passed without him realizing it, and so that sort of inspired the plot of the time loops, time loops, but the time skips.
Mm-hmm.
And then Win or Lose, their series, which I think should be treated just as equally as their films. The original Disney Plus series, Win or Lose, was based off of the two directors who they worked on Toy Story 4, and they would go to the same meeting and have completely different interpretations of the outcome. Like they shared an office, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that meeting went really great." It's like, "No, this movie's terrible because of it." So that gave them the inspiration of how people interpret the same event differently, and so that's what led to Win or Lose, which every episode shows a different character's perspective of the same softball game. What I always say is, yes, these films are not. They are different. They are objectively different from, Pixar's quote unquote golden age, the 95 to 2010. But different doesn't mean worse. Right. And I also wouldn't say it means better either. It's just, I can understand why people don't latch onto them, because a lot of them are relatively niche personal stories. But that was because that was sort of the direction that they wanted to go. And so I have enjoyed practically every film that's come out this decade. I mean, Luca is my favorite film. Still is, bar none. When you invited me on here, you invited me to talk about Luca because I've talked about it ad nauseum on my account. And it's just, that was just weird because it's just like, I just like the film and the aesthetic and the nostalgic, cozy feeling of it, but I don't have like a personal connection to it the way that I do Elio.
Which is fine.
So I've sort of been defensive of any of these newer personal Pixar films. Like I'm really not a huge fan of Turning Red, but I will defend it any day because of what they were trying to accomplish and the personality that was put into it by the director and the creative team of doing something different with Pixar. And I also, ever since Into the Spider-Verse 2018 completely rocked the animation industry as we know it. And I would say rightly so, because computer animation had progressed to the point where you can easily make photorealistic stuff, and even now in the day of AI, you can make photorealistic animation the click of a button. And so I think that animation needed to take this turn where you have stylized things that sort of look like a combination of the 3D animation that Pixar pioneered combined with other styles. So Spider-Verse does that with comic book styles. K-pop Demon Hunters does it with anime. And so because of Spider-Verse, everyone now has this expectation that anything that looks like old Pixar stuff is not fresh anymore. And Pixar has admittedly been a little behind in catching up to that style. But the thing is, so many people, when they say they want a different animation style, what they really mean is they want it to look like Spider-Verse. It's like every time I point out to people how nearly every Pixar film this decade does have a new unique animation style, people don't really believe me because it's not 3D that looks like 2D with a reduced frame rate like Spider-Verse or Mitchell's vs. the Machines or K-pop Demon Hunters. So it's like, I guess, just back up. Toy Story 4 and Soul are where Pixar peaked in terms of photorealistic animation. It's Toy Story 4, despite its faults, is an absolutely gorgeous film. And Soul the same way. The real life scenes set in New York are just fantastic. And in fact, I assume that they had to make like caricature character designs because otherwise it would just look too real. I credit Luca as where Pixar broke the mold in terms of their style and their visual style, because the director Enrico Casarosa specifically infused elements of Aardman claymation, 1970s anime, and Looney Tunes in the way that they animated it. And so the Bean Mouth that people talk about, the first film that they did that with was Luca, and I assumed that was because with claymation, that's how their mouths look.
Yeah.
And like the way how their limbs move was very reminiscent of like Looney Tunes, where like with if you were to draw someone like waving their arms with those old cartoons, you would draw multiple arms, right? And so that's what they would do with the animation, is they would render multiple 3D arms to wave that way. Like there's a scene when Luke and Alberto are like swimming and jumping up the water, and like Luke is like flailing his arms around. You can really see that happening. And then he was really heavily inspired by Hayao Miyazaki. I actually just watched Enrico Casarosa specifically credited this anime series that Miyazaki did. Miyazaki's the Studio Ghibli head, for listeners who don't know. He did before Studio Ghibli, called Future Boy Conan. It's a 28 episode anime series. I recently just watched it. It's absolutely phenomenal. And it wasn't officially released in the States until like 4 years ago. But it was huge overseas, and Casarosa grew up in Italy, and so he grew up watching this. And so anime back then was done very, very cheaply, and Miyazaki had this talent of being able to tell a lot with as few resources as they could. And so he applied that same sort of idea to Luca, and then a lot of the slow-paced, cozy feeling, nostalgic feeling that you get from a lot of Ghibli films was also in Luca. So, so first you have the fact that the character designs in Luca don't look like normal Pixar characters, and then they also move differently. The tone is a lot different. So I always credit Luca as breaking the mold that Pixar had been doing for 15 years. But it doesn't get that kind of appreciation because it doesn't look like a moving comic book, is the thing. And then, like, Turning Red had a lot of the anime influences, and it drives me nuts when people always bring that up in K-pop Demon Hunters, when Turning Red did a lot of the same things. And Elemental, they had to invent new software to render a main character that has no definitive shape.
Just crazy.
It's like when you go back to like the Bugs Life days, Bugs Life literally only exists because they knew that the character models were going to be really stiff. So they're like, okay, let's do toys that are made of plastic, and then now let's do animals that have exoskeletons, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that 20 years later you have a film where a character is made of fire, who not only doesn't have a definitive shape but doesn't have a definitive volume, it's just like mind blowing, and it drove me up a wall when people were like, "Oh, well, you look at Across the Spider-Verse, and they have these watercolor scenes and all of this stuff in Spider-Punk, but in Elemental just looks like a normal Pixar film." I'm like, "Are you blind? Like, no, it does not." I'm sorry, it doesn't look like a comic book, but like there's legitimately impressive things that are going on there.
Yeah, like when they put their hands together and that close up, and like you really look at that and you're just like, like you're not. Yeah. I don't know.
So and so nearly every film that Pixar has done this decade has been experimental in some ways. Like even back in Onward, whenever he shoots magic out of the staff, that's actually 2D animation.
Oh wow! I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was using the same sort of technique as Spider-Verse, but then also kind of they did the same in Moana with Maui's tattoos.
Okay.
It was sort of 2D animation on top of these 3D models, and then even Win or Lose is the most ridiculous thing Pixar's ever done. Have you seen it?
I got to watch it. It's been on my list forever.
Every episode, it has, it's from a different character's point of view, but they'll have a unique animation style that sort of depicts the emotions of the characters. Mm-hmm. So, like, there's this little kid who likes to look at the world through his cardboard tube, and so he'll see scenes, and they look like they're sketches drawn by a 5-year-old. And then there's this other kid who like has a crush on a girl, and so he has this little version of himself who's like in a cardboard box in his heart, and it's like there's just this really cool, unique animation to every single episode. And with a streaming series, you can be a bit more experimental like that. Mm-hmm. But it just doesn't get the credit because it doesn't look like Spider-Verse. Mm-hmm. And so, what was the question? Yeah, the new Pixar films. I think they all have value in their own way. I don't love all of them. Lightyear is my least favorite Pixar film by far. But still, it has some absolutely fantastic animation and environments, and a lot of the intention behind the story I think is admirable. And then like I'm not crazy about Inside Out 2. I don't think it's bad by any means. But it just drives me nuts that that's the only financially successful one this decade, and in a lot of ways the only critically successful one. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people?
Well, that's why we got Toy Story 5.
Yep. And so, and again, that was a whole mess behind the scenes that they had to push that up because of Elio and because they needed the money because they had like 5 box office bombs in a row. But a big part of it was because of Bob Chapek cheapening the Pixar brand by throwing the films on Disney Plus. Right. And I have said this for years. They say that the reason that they put Luca and Turning Red on Disney Plus was because of the pandemic. I don't believe that. I think that's bull. I think that was just a scapegoat because, first of all, in both cases, Disney Animation put their own film in theaters 3 months before.
And Kanto and Raya. Yeah.
Raya the Last Dragon came out before Turning Red, or Luca, and then Encanto before Turning Red.
Yeah.
And mind you, both of them didn't do well at the box office, but still, 2021 was the year when there was significantly more competition in the streaming market. That's when HBO Max was really ramping up. Apple TV Plus, Paramount Plus launched that year. And so Disney needed more premium content. And so let's take this animation studio and, these are first-time minority directors. Their films aren't going to be, that highly regarded. So let's just throw their films on Disney Plus. And it's just like,
yeah.
And so by so doing, they also cheapened the Pixar brand because people saw them as
direct-to-streaming movies, yeah.
Direct-to-streaming movies. It's like, even though Encanto and Raya didn't do well in theaters, at least they were put in theaters.
Yeah.
And so if Encanto was a streaming exclusive movie, I don't think it would have this kind of reputation that it does. It would still be just as popular, but I don't think it would have been seen as as prestige of a movie as it is.
Yeah. I think Encanto also benefited from the Lin-Manuel Miranda brand too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which was also huge that year.
Yeah.
But I just feel like Soul was understandable. That was still in 2020. That was supposed to release in November of 2020. Or I think it was actually in June that year.
Yeah, June 2020. Yeah, they just kept pushing it back.
And so they kept pushing it back. And also because that's a film about discovering yourself and your passions, I think that was an appropriate film to get a wide audience to see because we were all suffering mentally because of lockdowns.
Yeah.
But all 3 of them did eventually get theatrical releases 3 years later.
Yeah.
in the month of January in 2024. And I had to drive 2 hours to the closest screening that had Luca.
That's commitment.
So it's like, it was maybe in like, it was barely wide release. And they never advertised it, and it was during the dump months. And so it's just like, if they had said, okay, we're going to put Soul on Disney Plus, but, or if they had done what they did with Wonder Woman that same day, I think. Wonder Woman was put in theaters, but it was also direct to HBO Max.
Yeah.
I think they had done the same thing. Even though Wonder Woman made no money in theaters, at least it was put in theaters. And if they did the same thing with Soul, I don't think it would have, affected that so much. So, but like, I frequently, my heart goes out to Enrique Casarosa, the director of Luca, who like, he lived his whole life growing up in Italy, being an artist, and having to leave his lifestyle to move to America and work his way up, working for Disney Channel and then Blue Sky, and then finally got a job at Pixar as a story artist, and then works as a story artist for 15 years, and then finally he gets to do the short La Luna, and then that proves his worth, and then he finally gets to tell the story he wants, and it happens to be at this time where Pixar is letting you tell the story that you want. He gets to tell this very personal story, and it gets a theatrical release because, oh no, there's a pandemic. Oh, but don't worry, even though Soul got in theaters, we still have a theatrical release for you, Luca. Oh, whoops, 2 months before, we're just going to pull that release.
Not even a premiere access either. Like, you remember how they put like some of them for like $30 on Disney Plus?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just like, this dude had like a 25-year path to get Luca made, and that was how it ended up. I have a official poster for Luca in my room that is specifically the one that says in theaters June 18th.
Hold on to that.
Yeah. So I had to search to find that one. But yeah, and at least Domichi, I mean, so thankfully, Pete Docter did Soul, and Casarosa did Luca, and Domichi did Turning Red. Thankfully, Casarosa and Domichi have their new movies coming out. Domichi co-directed Elio, of course, but then she's also working on a new film that I think comes out in 2029, and then Casarosa has Gato, which comes out next year. So luckily, they'll get a second chance, but yeah.
Isn't Gato like releasing very closely to Spider-Verse?
Yes, so it was originally.
Okay.
It was originally scheduled for June 18th, and then it was a week before Beyond the Spider-Verse, and then Beyond the Spider-Verse moved up 1 week. 1 week. There's no way that was just a coincidence that they moved it up to the same day. And I remember making a rant about this, that I thought that was very, very dirty of Sony.
Yeah.
But back in December, they announced they moved Gato up to March.
Okay.
So it's not going to have that competition, which I'm glad of, because there's so much competition for family films in the summer anyway. Gato is going to be really, really different, though. It's going to be, the entire film's going to look like it's hand painted.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, I literally just put a video right before we recorded here. One of the story artists on it revealed that we only have one image of it right now, and it looks like this sort of hand-painted scene set in Venice. And the story artist said, that's not concept art. That's what the film's going to look like. Every single frame of the film is going to look like either an illustration or a watercolor painting. So, like, this is finally what people are wanting, of like, hey, look, it's 3D that looks like 2D, but like they're going all in on it. And I think that Casarosa is the perfect person to do it, because, like I said, he broke the mold with Luca, and I think he's like really has the reins to just go wild with Gato. But I've been obsessed with this movie since the day they announced it, and I've made a video for every single piece of news. And I have my ultimate goal in maybe not, probably shouldn't say my goal in life, but a really, really big goal of mine is I want to be invited to the pre-screening for Gato, because they generally do a day where they invite content creators to see early screening of it on Pixar campus. And so I have been like trying to contact people at Pixar or contact people who went to the one for Hoppers, and just like I'm so hell bent on being able to do that, because I'm like the biggest hype man for this movie. And so I know this podcast isn't about Luca, but I've always said that I don't want Luca to have a sequel. I think that it ends perfectly as it is, and any kind of sequel would just detract from the themes of the first. So the fact that you have a new film by the same director and producer, also set in Italy, with a similar vibe, with new characters to fall in love with, I think it's the best case scenario. So that's why I've been excited for this one.
Okay. Brings up my question: should Elio ever get a sequel? What would you like to see from it?
I'm very averse to sequels in general.
Okay.
Particularly to film. Well, okay, for sequels to films that were not written to have sequels, which has been the case for literally every Pixar film. They make every single Pixar film with the intention of it standing alone or being conclusive. I think literally the only exception is Lightyear, which has like a cliffhanger post-credit scene that will never be resolved because the entire production team of that film was laid off. Ordinarily, I would say no, I don't want a sequel. Elio and Elemental are the only Pixar movies where I would actually love to see a sequel to. Okay. And as I mentioned before, the post-credit scene of Elio, his voice has changed. So that made me think: did they record this later on, thinking that they were going to do something with it later? Generally, what I say with Elio is that there's enough dangling threads that you could weave into a story if you wanted to. I definitely don't think that it was written to have one. They had to put together as best they could the broken pieces of the original story and make something that worked. But I think that you could easily tell a sequel to Elio if you have a time jump to when Elio is like 18 or 20. He's ready to join the Communiverse. He's ready to reunite with Gordon. And I think that you could tell that story. You can see how he emotionally matures based off of what he learned from the first film. And then he can go, galactic, exploring the universe with Gordon through the Communiverse. Because, I mean, Elio does only just, it's this outer space magnificent thing, and only takes place on one spaceship, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that there's plenty of opportunities where you can, go from there. Because a lot of people say the ending ends how it is because that's just how kids' movies end. I'm like, no, there's a lot of like thematic richness to why he turns down the Communiverse, and he even says, "This is not goodbye. This is just not yet."
Yeah,
because he understands that this is something he still wants. It's just something that he wants to, he needs to take care of things first while he's still young. And so I think that there's certainly potential for a sequel to go there. However, it will literally never happen. Elio made so little money, and also the amount of backlash online certainly doesn't help its reputation.
Yeah.
There have been rumors for a bit that there was going to be a Disney Plus series.
I was just saying, I could definitely see a Disney Plus series.
Yeah, this rumor's been going around for a while, and like there are so many things like, oh, this thing on this investors call seems to imply this whole thing, and none of that is true because the streaming department at Pixar was shut down. The person I keep referencing, my friend who works there, she was hired for Pixar streaming department, and so they're the ones who made Cars on the Road and Dream Productions and Win or Lose. And so after Win or Lose was finished, they shut down the production, and that was one of the things Iger did. That's where most of the layoffs were, was shutting down the streaming service or the streaming department of Pixar. So like that was never a thing of there being a streaming series based off of Elio, unless it was made by Disney.
Okay.
Which I doubt. But yeah, for the same reason why we're never going to see a sequel to The Good Dinosaur or Lightyear. They were both unpopular and not financially successful. I mean, Elio, I think, has got to be the biggest money loser for Pixar.
Wow, a sequel to The Good Dinosaur. That's something to think about later. Any Elio merchandise or memorabilia you really hold dear in your collection?
Yes, my microphone holder here is my bottle of Glorp.
Incredible.
Which I got when I saw it on opening night, which was weird. I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to like this film. But I'm really glad that I got that. And I'm wearing a shirt here that is my Elio shirt.
Okay.
It's a sort of flat version of Elio's.
Oh, I see it, yeah. Very cool.
And then they had posters when it at my theater when it came out, and so I have that up. And I remember I was actually shopping. I was going to get like a little stuffed version of the supercomputer, and then I realized I think I'm spending more money on merchandise for Elio than I am for Luca, which is my favorite film. Like I literally flew to Italy to go to where Luca takes place.
Wow.
Because of that film, my daughter's middle name is Giulietta because of Luca. And so I'm like, maybe I should refocus on what my favorite film is. Anyway, so yes, I do have, it's rare that I have merchandise for a new film that I really love, but yeah, I do have some Elio stuff here.
Are you working on a piece for Cinematic Scribbles based on Elio?
Yes. So for those new here, I make artwork where I write out movie scripts. So I write out all the dialogue to a script, and then the words form an image from the movie or reminiscent of the movie. That's kind of how I got my start on social media. And so, yes, I do have the script ready for Elio. That's why I told you I contacted the actor because of the Elioese gibberish language. I asked him, he mentioned in an interview that he kind of made that up on the spot. So I asked him, like, okay, if I was to transcribe this, what would I need to do? And so I have a script. The only reason is I haven't gone forward with it is I haven't quite nailed what I want the image to be. And then there's also the fact that with my artwork, I have to prioritize the things that is actually going to make me money, because this is sort of this in the content creation are my full-time jobs now. And so, like last year, I was focused. I did Superman and Wicked and Came Out Human Hunters and stuff. So if I ever do Elio, it will be a side project. The same way how when I did Luca, it was a side project. But yes, it's in the stage. It's in the early stages of development where I have the transcript completely done and proofread and everything. I just need to go on the next steps there.
All right, stay tuned. I'm a big physical media collector. If I really love a film, I'll buy the Blu-ray or DVD. Disney still puts their movies out on Blu-rays and DVDs, but they're not as robust like the Monsters Inc. and Finding Nemo ones from back in the day. My first question is, do you own Elio on Blu-ray and DVD?
I do not. I bought the digital version the day it came out, so my wife could watch it. And that's actually where a lot of the bonus features are exclusive to. Like, it's not even on the physical release, and it's not on Disney Plus.
Wow. Okay.
Which I find really interesting.
That's a bizarre twist. Yeah.
So this will be a disappointment to both you and my brother, who is also a massive physical media collector. He has, I'm not joking, at least 5,000 pieces of physical media of everything from Blu-rays to Betamax to everything.
I thought I had too much. All right.
Yeah. I'm not a huge physical media guy because I've been coerced by the convenience of streaming and digital. And I completely understand why that is a bad thing because of the streamers making it unavailable or taking that down, making it inaccessible. I completely understand why physical media is so important. I do have a Blu-ray for Luca.
Good.
And I'm actually starting to build a physical media collection. I just in the past year started because with my son getting older and soon being able to operate a TV by himself, I don't want him to have unlimited access to streaming services. And so what we've been doing is we've been building a collection of Blu-rays and DVDs of things that we know are safe. So movies and shows that we are totally fine with him watching unsupervised without us knowing. So underneath the TV in the playroom, we have maybe once a month we go to a thrift store and we buy up a bunch of old discs. So that's his library that he has unlimited access to. So I suppose I will probably get Elio on DVD or on Blu-ray eventually. So yeah, I see the benefit to it because the streaming landscape changes so much and it's certainly not child friendly. And so that's what I have to take into consideration. So basically this is a long way of saying, no, I'm not into physical media and I'm ashamed of it. And I'm proud of people like you.
Thank you. Although I have not bought a Pixar film since Toy Story 4 because I too am coerced sometimes. And people are just like, you don't need to buy it. You have it on Disney Plus. And I'm like, yeah, but... So one day I just need to like go on Amazon and get Onward to Hoppers, add to cart, and just take that.
Sometimes you can find lots of them on eBay. That's what I look for.
Yeah. So why do you think people should see Elio if they haven't?
I always tell people to see Elio once so you actually know what it's about. Instead of believing what the online discourse says that it is. Because as I probably spent about 4.5 hours earlier in this podcast explaining, most of the discourse online are people claiming the film is something that it's not. I've made over a dozen videos about Elio at this point, to one degree or another, defending it. And the purpose is not of those videos is not to get people to love the film the same way I do. The purpose is to get people to watch it once and to appreciate it. That's all I ask of people because nobody saw it in theaters. It's a lot different than like Turning Red, where everyone did see it and there was controversy, needless controversy behind it.
Oh my God.
Whereas a lot of people hate Elio for no reason, because it's not K-pop Demon Hunters. And so I'm like, please just watch it once, understand what it's actually supposed to say, understand that it's not what the tabloids say it is, and just at least appreciate it to a certain degree. And I've gotten comments of people saying, hey, thanks for your videos. I watched the movie and I loved it. And I didn't expect to, find it so emotional. And so, if nothing else, I want people to watch it to form a proper opinion of it. I suppose more, a wider lens is so that you can appreciate a lot of the stellar animation, but then also have this emotional journey with Elio regarding loneliness and his friendship with Gordon. Like, there's a lot of good things in the film itself that I think are worth recommending to people, because I think that they depict the lonely autistic kid thing so intimately well, and that's something that you can, like, a perspective that you can gain by watching the film.
Okay. What do you hope Elio's place in Pixar history is? Like, say, 30 years from now, a student at Cal Arts is doing his dissertation on Elio, and he's doing his research, and he just happens to find you and I talking about it on the internet. What do you hope people look back on this film and see?
I think its reputation in the future will be what its reputation now kind of is, which is underrated hidden gem. Because there aren't a ton of hidden gems in Pixar because Pixar is very mainstream. But Elio is one where it was so unsuccessful that very few people did see it and see it for what it was. And so I think it's going to gain that reputation as, like, it's not going to spawn a media franchise, and it's something that Disney largely ignores, because that's why I think it was marketed so terribly. And so I think a lot of people looking back at Elio are not only going to appreciate it as, oh, this is a really good film that no one talks about, but also Elio does a lot of things that other more popular Pixar films of this decade get praised for. I made a whole video about how almost everything that people praise Hoppers for, with the exception of the humor, is in Elio. Like, there's also a lonely kid who feels different, who feels lonely because they're different, and just like the animation and the way in which it has these photorealistic things with these cartoony characters, and how it has a minority lead and tells this really in-depth story, and even to the point where there are comedic moments of body horror. Like, the exact things that people praise Hoppers for are in Elio, and nobody seems to appreciate that.
I did have the body horror thought when I was watching Elio, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I remember my wife just cracking, because we're not really horror people, but she was losing her mind at, like, when the clone Elio starts melting. She just thought it was hysterical. I I remember I got a comment where someone said, "Yeah, that scene like freaked out my 6-year-old." I'm like, "Hey, look, I think every kid would be toughened up by a little soft body horror at that age, you know."
Or just when like she's like trying to investigate him, like something's wrong with him, and she takes the hair, and the hair reattaches itself to his head, and then she's like, "Let me just pull the eye patch up."
Yeah,
just that whole thing. Or even when he like cuts his finger. Like,
yeah, and that was a late addition as well. My friend who worked on it earlier said the eye patch was always a thing, but how he got the eye injury changed about 20 times throughout production. In fact, there's even a deleted scene of like a fully animated scene where he's being chased by bullies and the handlebar on his bike hits him in the eye.
Oh,
so like pretty late so the eye patch was always a thing, but she said that the whole thing about Clone Elio not having the eye behind the patch was not always a thing, and she thought that was genius.
Wow.
that
was a great moment. And my last question is, why does Elio matter to you?
To me, Elio, the reason why Elio is so special to me is because, very specifically, is because of the depiction of a lonely child on the autism spectrum who doesn't feel he belongs and discovers that he does have the ability to connect with others and is loved by more people than he realizes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's why I'm so attached to it, and that's the reason why I felt that I would make for a better conversation about Elio rather than Luca, even though I know just as much and could rant just as long about Luca. But I have that connection with that character in that way, so that's why it matters to me. I think, generally speaking, Elio is very much a love letter to sci-fi films. That's something it does not get enough attention for. There's probably at least a dozen sci-fi movies that are directly referenced in Elio. I mean, there's references to Terminator and Alien and Close Encounters, and just like there's so many like Easter eggs and visual references and things like that that I think a lot of people don't recognize. Like it's this sci-fi film that is very much paying homage to the sci-fi films that came before it. So that's another thing. And then I think it matters because this is a film that should have never made it past the finish line because of how much got in the way of it. And so I think when I first discovered that original trailer and saw just how different it was just 2 years before the release, I was like, it is insane to me how much the story had to be changed, and yet the final product is still so good. Like, just little things like the "Okay, bye, I love you" had a completely different context than the original, and yet they still wove it into this new version, and it makes sense. And so the fact that they were able to sort of pick up the pieces of this troubled production and form it into, at worst, a pretty okay movie, and then at best, something that means something to me personally, is I think something that Elio should be commended for, and something that at the very least is a reason why people should look at it and appreciate it.
Ben, this was great. Thank you so much. And
yeah,
honestly, if you want to come back and talk Luca, you are more than welcome to.
I'm definitely open to that. Its 5-year anniversary is next month.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So it's really frustrating because it's the same day as Toy Story 5 release. I'm like,
oh,
I don't care as much about Toy Story 5 as I do with the 5-year anniversary of Luca.
Oh, what weird timing. All right. Well, anyway,
Pixar
thank you
really
again.
likes that second weekend in June.
Yeah, they do love that weekend. All right. Thank you so much, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. This is my pleasure.
Yeah. And folks, thank you for listening to another episode of Movies That Matter. Please give Ben a follow on all the socials and check out Cinematic Scribbles as well. As for me, you can always find me either at Gmail or Instagram at Movies That Matter Pod. And you can also be my friend on Letterboxd at Chris Loves Films. As of this recording, my last 4 watches were The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, Elio, Avengers Infinity War, and Deadpool. Folks, the world is scary. Be kind to each other. And when life gets too scary, escape yourself into your favorite movie or piece of media. Have a good laugh, have a good cry, whatever you need. Don't worry about box office numbers or Rotten Tomato scores. Just watch what you love. Entertainment is subjective, and that's not a bad thing. Until next time, this has been Chris Flaherty with Ben Stanley. Thanks for listening to Movies That Matter.